looking at classification criteria for ASPE. So we just finished in the last video doing less E for IFRS, all the entries, the calculations, and so on. And if you remember from earlier, under IFRS, we pretty much assume all leases are capital leases. So we capitalize, put an asset and a liability if we're leasing something as the lessee. And unless they're the value of the asset's very small or they're at 12 months or less. With ASPE, you look at different criteria. So again, this is for the lessee. And in order to decide whether it's an operating lease, which is just like rent, versus a finance or capital lease, can't spell, they're going to use the following criteria. So basically, if the risks and rewards of ownership are transferred from the owner or the lessor to the lessee, then it'll be a capital lease. So the nice thing with ASPE, unlike IFRS, it's a lot more specific in terms of numbers. So here's the criteria. Transfer of ownership. There's reasonable assurance that the lessee will obtain ownership of the leased property, including through a bargain purchase option. If that's yes, then it will be capital. So yes equals capital. And any one of the following has to be met. It doesn't have to be all three. The economic life test. The lessee benefit from the asset for the most part of the asset's life. I don't think I said that properly. So, yeah, I'm just going to read it. Lessee will benefit for most of the asset. Is that even English? Okay, basically, are they going to use the asset and gain benefits from it over most assets' economic life? So if you had a 35-year asset and the lessee was going to use it for 5 years, that's not most of the life. That's what they're asking. So again, yes equals capital for any one of these. And then recovery of investment. Is the present value of the minimum lease payment equal to 90% or more of the fair value of the leased asset? So if any one of those are true, then it'll be a capital lease. I'm just going to hit the autofocus. Okay, so if it meets the criteria for a capital lease, you're capitalizing the asset, recording the lease liabilities similar to IFRS, but of course there's different terminology. Equipment under lease and options under lease are the two. This is the asset, and of course that's the liability. So to do this and see how it works, let's flip over to page 9 and look at an example. So first part of example 3. I don't think we'll get the whole thing done in this video. So this is just determining, should it be an operating lease, which ends up just being rental expense, or should it actually be a finance or capital lease by the lessee where they put an actual asset on the liability, asset and a liability on the balance sheet? Okay, so let's look at page 9, example 3. So again, this is a typical kind of lease question where you get all this set out and you just have to know what to do with all the parts. So Oak Ridge Leasing Corporation signs an agreement to lease equipment to Crane. So these guys are the lessor, Crane is the lessee. And right now focusing on Crane's entries. So the term of the non-cancelable lease is 5 years, no renewal option. Equipment has an estimated life of 6 years. Assets fair value, January 1st, is $85,000. The asset will revert to the lessor at the end of the lease term, at which time the asset is of a residual value of $6,000 not guaranteed. Crane Limited assumes direct responsibility for all executory costs. So remember, Crane is us, the lessee, which include $1,000 to insurance and $1,700 for property taxes. The agreement requires annual rental payments. So just because it says rental doesn't mean it's an operating. Rental and lease payments are used the same way. Of $20567 to Oak Ridge, the lessor, beginning January 1st, 2020. The lessee's, that's us, incremental borrowing rate is 14%. The lessor's implicit rate is 13% and known to the lessee. Crane Limited uses straight line depreciation for the equipment. And now, you may remember in an earlier video, I said, oh, we won't use reversing entries. Someone should have checked ahead and prepped a little bit further ahead. Yes, we are going to use reversing entries. Just so you remember them again, they'll show up if and when you get to the CPA. You might find it if you're working, even if you don't go on the CPA, because it's commonly used, or they're commonly used when an accountant does your books at year end. Anyway, we'll talk more about it when I get there. Okay, sorry, I just had to take a little break there. Okay, so before we do anything, we're going to use this information to determine if it actually is a capital lease or not. Now up here, clearly this is the example is a capital lease, but let's see why for ASPE. So go back to page 8 and just keep page 9 handy. Okay, so transfer of ownership. Given the information on page 9, is there reasonable assurance the lessee will obtain ownership of the leased property, including through a bargain purchase option? Because remember, if it has a bargain purchase option, we assume that it's going to keep it. So, if we look at point 2, oh no, point 3, the asset will revert to the lessor, which means it's going back to the lessor. So, no. This one's a no. Okay, does that make sense? I'm asking no one because I'm sitting in a room by myself. The dogs aren't even here. Okay, economic lifetime. Will the lessee benefit from the asset over most of its life? So, usually assumed to occur if the lease term is 75% or more of the leased property's economic life. Well, the lease term is how many years? 5, and the economic life of the property is number 1, 6. So let's do 5 divided by 6, and that equals 80%. So this is a yes. So we've got 1 yes. So just by the 1 yes, in real life, you'd just stop here and you'd go on and go, yep, capital lease, we're good. But we might as well go on and do the last step. Now, recovery of investment. We need to know the present value of the minimum lease payments, and we have to compare it to the fair value to see if it's over 90%. So I'm actually going to do this down here, just to give us some room. So we need present value. This is number, or recovery. Well, we know it's down here. Present value of the payments. So, is what we don't know. N is 5. I. Now I, there's two different numbers given on page 9. I'm just going to put page 9 back here. For the less E, under IFRS, IFRS would use this if it was known. But we're doing IFRS, we're doing ASPE. And which ASPE uses the lower of the two. So ASPE is going to use 13%. Everybody okay with that? Okay, so we know I is 13. The payments. And we don't have any guaranteed or unguaranteed purchase option. So future value, there's nothing. When you're putting it in the calculator, you can leave it as 0 if you've, or just not even put that in if you've cleared your memory. If you haven't, it's going to carry it from the last example you did, so I always like to just make sure I put it in. Remember that these two have the same sign. So you do present value, and remember BGN is on. You do a present value and you get 81743. So now we have to check equal 90% or more. So we take 81,743 over, what's the fair value of the leased asset? Waiting for someone to answer. Oh my goodness. It's 8,000. They said that in point number 2. And that equals 96%. So yes, also. So really, if you think about it, you guys, there's 3 things. You're looking at the transfer of ownership, you're looking at the economic test, and you're looking at the recovery of investment. So all of this is step 3 down here. And it's, remember, you only need one, and it would be a capital lease, not an operating lease. Okay, so we've proven that it is a capital lease. So now we can go on and do more of the question. But I think I'm going to stop the recording here and start again with the question to do all the entries. Bye.